Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Michael Regina and I am the author and creator of the Sleepover as well as the Adamsville trilogy of books. And this is my second video in this virtual classroom visit series that I'm putting together where I'm walking students through the sort of typical visit that I have whenever I show up in person at a school or do it via Zoom or something like that. And in the second video, we're going to be going through some frequently asked questions that I receive. Usually in my presentation at the end, I leave time open for questions and give you all a chance to ask whatever's on your mind, and I do some drawing along the way. And so let's dive right in with the first question, and I'll be drawing while we look into that. Okay, and the first question is, where do your ideas come from? So, this is such a fun question to answer because ideas come from a lot of different places. Let me pull my screen here so I can get ready to draw. And I really enjoy that process as well of learning about where different creators come up with their ideas, where things come from. And so yeah, let's dive into this question. So often when I'm given this question, it's because someone's a young writer and they're trying to figure out as well, like, hey, if I want to tell my own stories, tell me how you come up with ideas so I can come up with ideas. Now, for me, ideas come from really three different things. The first one is they come from the things that I'm interested in. So, meaning like I don't really write stories that are not the kinds of stories I would be excited to read if I didn't write them, if that makes sense. So, I try to create stories that are related to the sorts of things that I would really be excited about. And to that second point, the thing that I look for is I want to create a story that if the kind of story that I wish I could walk into a store and buy, but doesn't currently exist. So like if there was the ideal book made for Michael as a reader, me as a reader, and I could walk into the store and find it and buy it, but it doesn't exist. I want to go make that story. And then finally, that answer really is that I'm looking for things that I feel an emotional or direct connection with. And so I like my stories to have something where I either feel like I'm talking about something that matters to me or I talk about something that I'm currently thinking through a lot of, that sort of thing. So I'll give you, for example, on the sleepover here. So with the sleepover, I was really thinking to myself, I can't think of a lot of graphic novels for young readers that if I were to walk in the store and buy would be this sort of like really fun horror monster story that felt like the kinds of movies and stories that I loved growing up. And so I started thinking to myself, well, I'd really love to make something like that. So that was where I started that thinking was I want to create something that doesn't exist that I wish I could go buy. And then the next thing was I wanted it to be something that felt like it was really personal. And that part honestly was pretty difficult for a long time. And honestly, I was just driving to get my driver's license renewed, and I suddenly just it hit me like a ton of bricks that I could tell a story about this experience that I went through as a young kid of losing someone that meant a lot to me. As I've kind of told the story, that the sleepover is based on some real events that happened to me when I was a young kid, and then the people I grew up with at that time. So that's sort of like combination of like, oh, I can tell a story about a group of kids trapped inside of a house during a sleepover with a monster on the loose, and I can tie it back into this very real experience that I went through, and I can use it to talk about my friends and my family growing up and what all those things were like. It was like this perfect combination of story and personal experience that really got me excited about the sleepover. So what I would say is to summarize this point, if you're trying to think of an idea, I would start off with what's the kind of thing you wish that you could read but you can't, and then go make that story. Use your interest, the things that you get excited about to tell a story, and then finally, I would look to maybe talk about something you care about or tie it back to yourself in an interesting way. You don't need to do all those things, but that's how I answer the question of where do I come up with ideas when I'm coming up with my books. Okay, and the second question, how long does it take to make a book? Now, this answer can be really tricky because I think a lot of times what people are wondering is like, hey, if I want to make comics, how long is this going to take me to make a book that's like your book? And the answer is, well, for me, it takes somewhere around 2 years. It takes me like 6 months or so to write it, and then I can do all the art in about another year or two. But that's a really unfair answer, especially to kids, because I'm talking about the answer to that question from the standpoint of being an adult who kind of does this professionally, and I'm trying to create books that look a certain way that publishers get excited about. I think if you're a kid who's looking to create books, don't focus so much on the how long does it take, because that's really difficult. I would just focus on creating stories and telling the kinds of stories that you want. I would also start smaller, so don't maybe create a 200-page book like the Sleepover is, but instead make smaller stories that are maybe 20 to 30 pages. Because part of what takes the Sleepover books like this, like the Sleepover, so long, is that they're much bigger. They're a pretty big book. But if I was just to make a short little comic that was maybe 30 pages or something like that, it would maybe only take me a couple of months to make something like that and be really proud of the results. So it really depends on how long the project is and what my goals are for it. So I've had some stories that were very short that took a long time, some that are longer that didn't take a whole long time, that took less than 2 years. So it really depends. I would also say this though, my normal cadence of work is that I try to work and create or draw or ink or color one page a day. So that's sort of my normal flow, is I want to essentially make one full page a day. And if I can get onto that sort of train, then the question can very easily be answered, like how long does it take to make the book? Well, if I'm doing one page a day or so, it's going to take me, for a 200-page book, something like 200, 250 days, something like that, with breaks in between. So hopefully that answers the question. It takes a long time. We are making a very complicated book with a lot of moving pieces, and that takes a while to do that and to do it well. The next question: how do you get good at drawing? So, the easiest answer to this question is that you draw a lot. You just draw a whole lot. When I was a kid, your age and all, I was asked all the time at school, can you help me? Can you help me draw good like that? And or to draw well? And I would always tell the kids, like, I don't know. I don't know if I can teach you how to draw, because a lot of what I've learned over years and years and years of practice. And not everybody has that sort of drive to want to become really good at drawing. So if you're interested in drawing and you want to become really good at it, or maybe do it for a job when you grow up, the best thing I can tell you is that you just need to draw a lot. You need to draw a whole lot. And the more you draw, and the more you draw with purpose, the better you'll get. So what do I mean by drawing with purpose? What I mean by drawing with purpose is that you're not just drawing to be silly, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that you're drawing to learn, meaning that you're choosing to draw things that you find challenging, and you're thinking through difficult subjects. So like, if you find drawing vehicles to be really hard, you're looking at pictures of cars and stuff like that, and you're practicing drawing cars or drawing people. Same thing, you're grabbing pictures of people, you're reading books on how do I draw people well, and so on and so forth. And so if you're drawing to learn, and you do that really intensely, you're going to get really good at drawing really, really quickly. So that's the biggest thing I would tell you. Now, one other thing that people ask, usually when they're asking this question of how do I get good at drawing, is that they also mean, like, how do I develop my own artistic style? How do I develop a style that looks like my art? Well, that one, here's the fun thing about creating your own artistic style. You really you often think that your artistic style is this thing that makes you uniquely you. So if your artwork looks like anybody else's artwork, you don't have a style or something like that. And that's just actually not true. What I've learned about your creating your own artistic style is that your art style is the combination of all these different interests that you have. So let me give you an example of what that means. So let's say you really love sort of the really cool, detailed pictures that are in the Amulet books by Kazu Kibuishi and Jason Kofo helping with the artwork. You really love how animated they look, and they look like these movie frames, and it's so cool. So what you do is you maybe look at that and say, I want to learn how to color like Jason and Kazu do with the Amulet series. And then maybe you look at you're like, but I also really love the Dogman books and how silly those books can be. And I love the humor and how crazy it is. So maybe you start using Dogman books as the inspiration for the kinds of character designs you come up with and the sort of silly over the top stuff that he does. And then lastly, maybe you're a big fan of like Raina Telgemeier, the way she draws and like the way she draws people and tells stories like that, and that they're set in these neighborhoods that feel like every other neighborhood in the world. And it's sort of like this very slice of life type story. Well, then you start developing stories that feel the same, and you draw people the way they look. So now you have an art style that's the combination of the coloring of Kazu, the silliness of Dave Pilkey with Dogman, and the drawing style of Raina Telgemeier. So that's how you develop your style. You actually run towards the things you get interested in, but you take elements of what they do and you learn from them. You don't just copy them outright. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, the next question. Will there be a sequel to The Sleepover? Well, I'll actually throw into this as well the question of like, for people who've read my first series, Adamsville, is there a sequel coming to Adamsville? And the answer to both questions at this point is no, there are no sequels planned for them. I really loved The Sleepover. I love the characters in The Sleepover. I love the journey that they go on. And, there definitely is a part of me that wishes I had more stories to tell with those characters, but I don't really like to just tell stories because I think it's going to sell a lot of copies or we'll have an audience that's super excited to read the next one. I had a story to tell with the sleepover, and I feel like I told it. And for now, that's kind of all I'm looking to do. And maybe in the future, something else could happen. I certainly have more experiences that I went through growing up in that neighborhood with those friends that I could mine for new stories. But I kind of wonder whether that would take away the how serious the sleepover was and how meaningful that is. So don't plan on making a sequel to the sleepover. And with Adamsville, there's a stronger likelihood that something could happen with that. But I think some things would need to happen first. We would need to get a book deal in place to help those books find an audience and that sort of thing. I don't think I would be doing it anytime soon. So maybe one day for that one for both, but honestly, at this time, not really planning on it. Okay, and what art tools do you use to make your comics? Well, that's an easy question to answer because I'm using one of them right now. I draw on a Wacom Cintiq monitor. It's a big drawing monitor with a stylus pen that I can draw on just like I would draw on a sheet of paper. And I also use a iPad Pro, which has really become my favorite way to draw. So if you have an iPad and an Apple Pencil, you can use these same programs on your iPad as you would like on a computer screen or on a desktop computer. So I use a program called Clip Studio Paint. That's my favorite program to draw in. That's the one I'm using right now. It's a program that's made for comic book artists. So there's a lot of tools that are built in here that are directly related to making comics, and a lot of programs don't do that. So it's a very friendly program for that. And then I write using a program called Scrivener, which is has the ability to like write in screenplay format, which is my preferred way of writing. So I use an iPad Pro primarily and Clip Studio Paint to draw in a program called Scrivener. I am getting back into doing a lot of artwork on paper as well. I've really been enjoying watercolor painting, and maybe I'll make some watercolor comics here in the future. We'll see. Okay, and our last question. What's your favorite part of making comics? So this is such a fun question to answer because really the thing I love so much about comics is I get to do everything. I get to write, I get to draw, I get to color, um, all this different stuff. It's such a cool medium as a creator because I get to wear so many different hats. I get to make a bunch of different, I get to do a bunch of different things to make comics. And so I never really get bored of anything because by the time I start to get bored of one step in the process, I'm on to the next one. So, like right now, I've been writing for a really long time and writing my next book. And I'm just so ready to not be writing anymore. I'm ready to be just making some art and making comics again. And it won't be much longer. And I think that's going to be exactly what I'll be doing. So, but if I were to really nail it down to like all things considered, what's my favorite part of making comics? The answer would be that I love coloring comics, mostly because it's such a all like the really hard work of making comics is done by the time I start coloring. So I've written the book now, I've drawn it all out, everything's ready to go, and all I'm doing is focusing on making the art look as good as I possibly can. So it's just a more relaxing process for me, and it's sort of like the final touches on the comic before it goes off to my publisher to take a look at it and get us ready to go to print. So yeah, I think my favorite part of the process is coloring altogether, but mostly because at that point I'm pretty spent on making comics and I'm just enjoying kind of having a more relaxing part of the process that doesn't require so much thinking. And so that's it. Those are the 6 most frequently asked questions I receive when I visit schools. I hope my answers were helpful for some of you, especially those of you out there looking to make comics and enjoying this process of maybe making your own books. I'm going to go ahead and throw up on the screen the drawing that I did during this time of Swan and Matthew. I hope you've enjoyed this time hanging out together. I enjoy doing it. I have more videos I hope to plan in the future, so hopefully more to come soon. But otherwise, thank you so much for having me again, hanging out with you. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk with you some more real soon.